Hey everybody, so this is my latest mod, which is the Hexaminx, which you probably know was originally designed by Tony Fisher. So I want to start this video with a little disclaimer that this is not for sale, and I'll never be selling any Hexaminxes, just because it's not my design, and I really just wanted to build this just for the challenge to see if I could do it myself. So I've known about the Hexaminx for a long time, and I've always kind of wanted to build one, I just never got around to it. So you can decide for yourself how close I got to the original, but here's Tony Fisher's Hexaminx on the left and mine is on the right. So the stickers aren't exactly the same, but I tried to get it as close as possible. So to be really critical of my own work, I wouldn't say that this is the best puzzle I've ever made. It's a little bit, maybe it's just the tensions. It's a little bit loose right now. It's not perfect, but I am pretty happy with how close I was able to get to the original one. Considering this is actually the very first time I've ever tried to modify any Minx mechanism. So this is my first Megaminx modification, and this was made from a stock Shengshao Megaminx. I didn't start with the mass-produced Hexaminx and then flatten it out. I actually did the full modification as it would have originally been done. And the turning is actually very nice. I'm actually happy with that. So to show you that the flatness is equal on all the sides, if you turn two sides like this, and you kind of view it from this way, you can see how this is basically perfectly flush on each side. And if I do that on different layers, it'll be the same thing. And then, like on the blue face, if we do it here, so you can see down the side here how it's basically flush no matter which way you do that pattern. And all of these stickers were made on my vinyl cutter, which I think makes them look really nice. They're all perfectly uniform and all the corners rounded over and everything like that. So I'm really happy with the overall look of it, actually. And I thought I'd share some pictures of the building process too, in case you were interested in seeing that. So I didn't remember to take any pictures after the first couple rounds on the belt sander, but here it is pretty close to the start, where you can see on the top there, those three pieces, how those have been flattened down from the original edges. And I've also extended up the center caps with plastic sheeting and extended some of the edges. And in this picture, after one more round of belt sanding, you can see that the center caps have been flattened down. And those are basically the shape they'll end up being at the end. And some of the edges have been flattened down also. But the corners I have still yet to modify. And then here, the corners are looking really terrible, but I've just globbed a bunch of epoxy on there. And also, those really sharp pieces I've extended up the edges, which will then get filed down. In the next picture you'll see. So here's after sanding those back down to the plane that is dictated by those pentagon kind of shape center caps. So now you can start to see the flat side emerging. The corners are still really rough, but they actually have some flattened sides now. So and then another round of epoxy to build up the corners a little bit more. And then sanding that back down roughly. And then a little bit more. Those Sharpie lines are just for me to keep track of which sides I've sanded and which sides I haven't yet. And then a little bit more. So now it's getting fairly close to the final shape, although I'll still do a lot of sanding after this. And then, of course, once I have the final shape, I disassemble the whole thing and smooth over every surface of every piece by hand to make sure all the sanding lines are taken off of it. So I guess I'll just scramble this thing up now. And I've actually never owned a Hexaminx before, so I didn't even have a puzzle to base this off of when I was modding it. But the solve shouldn't be that hard. It is just a Megaminx modification. But it'll solve exactly like a Super Megaminx with just the center orientation, but that shouldn't really be that big of a deal. But it does shapeshift like crazy, so that'll be the most interesting part of this puzzle, I think. So we'll go through a full scramble. Alignment is going to be pretty difficult on this, I think, to make sure you line it up perfectly every time. So I've just scrambled a couple sides by itself, and it looks kind of cool to have still this cubic form on this side, and then this side is just exploded into this pattern. The cool thing about Hexaminxes, which I really like, is it's a pretty simple puzzle. I mean, it's just a Megaminx. It's just a Super Megaminx, but it looks crazy. I mean, it looks like one of the craziest difficult shape-shifting puzzles, even though it's not that hard. It's one of those puzzles that looks a lot cooler than it is, if you know what I mean. So I'll go through the rest of the scramble now. So there's a full scramble, and it does look pretty crazy, I think. And I'll zoom up here so you can see some of the pieces closer. So hopefully you can see the surface quality of the sides of some of the pieces like this. If you, by feel, this is really smooth, so there's really no roughness in the turning. So you can see all those tiny stickers in the center there, how they're all perfectly rounded over. And something interesting about this, let me find, oh yeah, so like these corners here, can you see how they're basically touching there? So I had to be careful with the finishing of this to properly round over these corners, or else they would actually hit each other. And they touch a little bit, they just barely miss enough for it to not catch at all when it turns over itself like that. Because one plane of the mechanism here is intersecting with another plane here. And if those meet, you have to round them over, or else it'll just catch like crazy. So this is one of those mechanisms that you can't really extend out too far without doing some more crazy like 3D modeling. If you see some really extended versions of this, they'll have very curved lines on them. Usually they're 3D printed because that sort of stuff is, you can really just do by computer mostly. But doing it by hand, you have to be careful about extending too far and getting a lot of catching like that. The same sort of thing on these corners. So it's extended as far as you can basically go by hand. So hopefully you can see there on the side of this piece how that's been sanded down perfectly smooth. So I think that's about it for this video. And I'm really going to try to get back on a weekly schedule of posting videos on Mondays. So next Monday's video is going to be a crazy one. I'll just tell you right now. That's going to be a puzzle that I've been working on that one for quite a few months now, and it's going to be pretty ridiculous, even bigger than the last giant one I posted. So definitely keep an eye out for that, and thanks for watching.